Everyone, this is lesson 2.5, the American Revolution. The objective for today is in order for students to evaluate the causes of American victory during the Revolutionary War. They will take notes and complete a handout. And the essential question for today is what factors contributed to the victory of the American rebels? Go ahead and set up your notebook. This is your title. This is going to go on your left-hand side. Make sure you give yourself plenty of space in between each one because you're going to take plenty of notes for each item. And this is Unit 2, Lesson 5, the American Revolution. You're going to focus on the British advantages, American advantages, Ben Franklin and the French, the Battle of Saratoga, and the Battle of Yorktown. The Revolutionary War, when it began, these are some of the British. We're going to talk about the British strengths. They are 400% larger than the United States Army. They were more experienced, they had more money, they had a very dominant and strong navy, and they had the ability to manufacture and make war supplies. So they, from the start, if you were in Vegas, you would probably have bet on Great Britain. They just had everything you needed to win this war. The difference being, the British might have had all that, but the Americans had a lot too. First of all, the Americans had familiarity with the environment. They knew the land really well, and so they knew how to fight in the colonies. They also were committed to winning the war. Okay, they were the underdogs, definitely, but they really wanted their independence, and so they had more of a will to fight in this war than the British did. As a matter of fact, the British overall in England didn't really support this war. They didn't really understand why Great Britain was fighting in it. There's also a short supply line to their soldiers, meaning the soldiers could get supplies pretty quickly from a lot of the surrounding people. And their single defense strategy was just to outlast the British. They figured if we could outlast the British, then we can win. And Britain really underestimated the colonial commitment and how committed they were to this. So to win, the English had to find and defeat the Continental Army. So really, the Continental Army could kind of hide out as long as they could outlast the British. It's kind of like who could play hide and seek longer. So they both had different military strategies. General Washington was in charge of the American Army, and General Gage was in charge of the British Army. The Americans, again, like I said, their goal was to outlast the British. They got to defend their own lands, so they could drag the war out a little bit longer. They used what we call guerrilla tactics, meaning like hide and attack versus just come face forward. And they made an alliance with France, which we're going to talk about. The British had to divide and conquer. They used loyalists and seized property and encouraged slaves to revolt. They split the northern and southern colonies, and they would try to blockade at ports to prevent trade from happening. Excuse me. As long as Britain did not defeat the Continental Army, England could not win. So for the first couple of years of the war, the first year especially, we really didn't think that they were going to win. It didn't look like it was going to be possible. So Ben Franklin traveled to France, met with France to try to form an alliance with France. And essentially what happened was that the French was willing, but they needed to see that the Americans were going to have a chance to win. So it wasn't until after the Americans won the Battle of Saratoga in 1777 that the French went ahead and joined to support the Americans. And so that brings us to the Battle of Saratoga, which was a turning point in the Revolution. Why was this a turning point in the Revolution? Because that we won, French General Lafayette started to help train American troops in fighting. And so then the French Navy went ahead and fought against the British Navy, which ended up neutralizing their forces, which was good because the British Navy was known as one of the strongest navies at the time. When troops arrived in the spring of 1778, that's when we started to see the tide of the war change. So we saw the win of Saratoga helped definitely, but it wasn't until the spring of 1778 when we really started to see Americans really taking and winning During that winter, though, between the winter of 1777 and 1778, the Continental Army troops nearly starved to death at Valley Forge. But Washington and Lafayette inspired the troops when they were training them to fight through that and to continue to fight, even though they were starving to death, literally starving to death. So then from 1778 to 1781, both sides had victories, but we started to see more and more victories for the Americans, including the final victory of the Battle of Yorktown. So for the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, essentially what happened is it happened in Yorktown, so not all that far from where we're at, a little bit further south, obviously, on the Chesapeake Bay. General Washington trapped British Cornwallis between his troops and then the French Navy was sitting out here. So essentially they were stranded and they had nowhere to go. You can kind of see where the American troops were on both sides. Excuse me. And then, oops, sorry. The British troops. This gives you another kind of viewpoint of it. So you can see French, American, and British. So we have American and French out here. We have American and French out here. We have French out in the river. And so they really had nowhere to go. And another viewpoint from another angle. You can see all of the British troops being surrounded by the French on one side and the Americans on the other side. And just they could not get out and they were trapped. And so they eventually surrendered in 1781, ending the American Revolution. And that's it.